All right. We are live. Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Morgan, and I came across a young man who goes by Jungle Walker from Florida. And you can decide if you want to share your name or not. And how did we meet?
We met in the YouTube comments. I was going through one of your videos you had, I think, with T-Jump. You did a debate with him, I think, on Modern Day Debate. And I went to your channel and I was clicking through. And what I like to do is I like to get out of the bubble. So, like, if I started watching on T-Jump's channel. And so naturally, like 90% of all the comments are on T-Jump's side. And I want to engage with people on the other side. So I found the video on your channel and I started going through and talking to people who are in your comments. So I love that back and forth, that crosstalk. And to me, I think I have a more unique position. I mean, my story's not unique, but I grew up as a young Earth creationist. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Abeka homeschool program, but
Yep, we
they're
homeschooled. Yep, very
yeah,
well.
they put out a bunch of material all the way through the college level. If you really want to stay with Abeka, you can go to Pensacola Christian College. The
Mhm.
Hortons, who founded the Abeka Academy, they ran the Pensacola Christian College. Pensacola Christian Academy is right next door. And so I was kind of just inundated with the whole young Earth creationist mindset since before I even knew there was a term for it. So I went from being a young Earth creationist to kind of being more naturalistic and accepting evolution and then kind of exploring different ideas and understandings of reality. So I like to go back and uh, I think there's almost like a tendency after you change your mind on something to go
Mm.
back and have a desire to kind of flesh it out and like deconstruct it. Deconstructing is kind of a popular term these days. So
And-
that's what led me to your channel.
cool. Is your goal truth?
Absolutely.
Are you
Truth is the
sure?
only way to go.
Good, good. Because I know Christians, non Christians alike, often want to prove their paradigm more than they pursue truth. And that could be in the Bible, it could be in science. So I'm glad truth is your goal.
So
And go ahead.
there was some. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, no, you're in a roll. Keep going.
I wanted to say there's a very good question I think is really helpful. I think we tend to get locked into kind of a comfort zone with what we build our identity around. And I think that's a mistake. I don't think you should build your identity around your beliefs because if you do, then your goal can shift away from truth and your goal can just be protection for your belief system. And I wanted to say, is there something that could convince you that your current beliefs are not true?
Absolutely. I would give them up in a heartbeat. My goal
I
is
think,
truth.
yeah,
And that's why
perfect.
I gave up evolution because of truth, not because of emotion. I'll do a quickie on me. I was born going to church. When I was 14, my biology taught me the theory of evolution. English class taught us about the Scarlet Letter and killing witches. And social studies, we learned about the Inquisition and all kinds of other
Nathaniel
horrible.
Hawthorne, yeah.
Exactly. And then I said, wow, science and social. And I said, I'm giving this stuff up. But a little creation evolution witness got me to test it. And what it was a chick track that showed the ape man chart. It summarized basically the drawings are great, the fossils are awful. And
Hmm.
I said, no way, there's got to be millions of these fossils. And I dug into it and it's bits and pieces. And so my quick summary is the theory of evolution. And when I say that, I mean bacteria to blue whale are stories and drawings, not empirical evidence. And that's what I believe to be true.
So when you say there aren't any fossils, do you mean there aren't any fossils of transitional forms, or there are just no fossils at all?
Oh, there's trillions upon fossils. I found a bunch when I was a young man.
I wanted to make sure because my dad actually doesn't believe in fossils at all.
Oh, oh, well, I can't defend him. But in sixth grade, I was finding trilobites by the dozen, and I felt
Oh, I'm
great.
envious.
Yep, Western New York, you could find some too.
Mm. I went fossil hunting in Alabama one time, but there weren't any trilobites. I just found like crinoids and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it. we're obviously we're adults. It really doesn't matter what our parents believe. And do you care to share anything else about your intro?
Um, hmm. Well, I used to be like a really ardent apologist. Like I love studying apology arguments, and I would go into internet chat rooms back when that wasn't like uncool to do and argue about creation and evolution. And I was really ardent against it. And oh, there was something that you touched on that kind of resonated with something I wanted to bring this up. Are you familiar with the idea of punctuated equilibrium?
PE, I call it. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When I was in Abeka, the way they illustrated this was they had like a little family of dinosaurs and they're surrounded by a nest and like a bird, like a chicken pops out of an egg and they're like, What's going on here?" And that's how they taught punctuated equilibrium. But punctuated equilibrium is an explanation to why you have more of a stasis. And then the transitionary fossils, like maybe we'd see a bunch of primates and we'd see some humans, but you wouldn't see as many like Australopithecines because the fossils or organic life forms, they tend to remain in stasis until there is pressure. And then when there's that pressure to change, then something will change and pop into that niche. And once that niche is full, there isn't like a lot of room for other things to pop in. So the transitionary things are not as common as the stasis things. And that's why we see like booms and busts. And you can kind of look at this with cell phones. Like, I'm sure you remember back in the day when cell phones first came out, like in the days of the BlackBerry and everything. Cell phones were wild and crazy. Like you had some that, the Razor phones that would flip open. You had my buddy had a Sidekick, and that was wild because it had a phone screen that would just flip out like that. But now everybody's phone is the same. It's the rectangle. It's the black rectangle. That's all. Everybody's phone is the black rectangle. And so that's almost like how the fossil record is. Like you have these periods where a variety just explodes, but then the niche narrows down and everything kind of centers on that one stasis. And fossil record is kind of like that. And that's the idea of punctuated equilibrium.
Okay. Well, I'm so one cool thing about being old is you see more things. I remember people would carry battery packs with their phone with them in the old days. But here's
That's
my
devotion.
yeah. Here's my theory on punctuated equilibrium. Many evolutionists say, you know what? There really are not a lot of fossils of transitional forms. Well, we knew organisms transformed from one to another. Hey, they did it rapidly, and I'm not saying overnight. They did it so rapidly, there's not a lot of fossil evidence for it. So to me, punctuated equilibria is an excuse for admitting there's not a lot of evidence.
Well, what would you think is, how would you define a transitional form?
A transitional form. Well, those would be two words. I would say, and believe me, I'm simple. This is my evolution argument, and I hope it's not an English definition argument. But anyways, apes, and I'm sure you've heard this if you heard my videos, apes
Make apes.
People make people. Ladybugs make ladybugs.
Ladybugs, yeah.
Kangaroos make kangaroos. Now, we could get into, and then I'm not saying it's not important, word game definitions, but do you see that as a flawed proposal that ladybugs make ladybugs? That's what their DNA tells us. That's what genetics
sorry,
tells us.
my internet connection is...
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. If I cut you off, it's because what it's doing occasionally is like freezing, like your face will freeze and then the audio will cut out. So I don't know if you're still talking. So if I trip over you, I apologize. Okay. I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay. So my proposal that ladybugs make ladybugs, giraffes make giraffes is supported by genetics, biochemistry, DNA, and most importantly, everything that our peepers see. People have observed trillions of generations of bacteria. It always
what
makes
is a
bacteria.
Human? You said people make people. How would you, if you found a bone in the ground, how would you determine if it was a people bone?
Very good. Good question. Years ago, I was in a debate. I'm not a hero. I flew to New York on my own dime, but it was worth it. And my opponent, Dr. Walter Jahn, laid out all these skulls. And he said, Bill, could you come down here and put them in sequence of what you think are human and not human? And I said, appreciate your time and effort, but I'm not going to take your pop quiz. But if I wanted to determine what they were, I would use genetics, DNA, for the sequencing of the genome. And here's one of my points. Everything I say is pretty simple because I am simple. Suppose the Olympic team was flying to Paris and sadly they crashed into a mountain and got buried and then were dug up. They would have gymnasts with tiny little skulls. They would have shot putters with enormous skulls. And you know my point. Some people would have sloped foreheads. Some people would have straight foreheads. And people could argue, hey, look at all these different species based on the variation of their bones. But they're all human. So I can't put into words a little definition of what a human skull would look like compared to an ape skull, because some people have foreheads at 45 degrees. Some have them straight up. Some have a ridged brow and some don't. They all have most likely 46 chromosomes.
Would that kind of go into the idea of kinds? Because I know kinds is a very popular creationist term, and it's used in the Bible.
Yep. And I would put that at about the family level.
So would you go with like a human definition of kinds, or would you go with the biblical definition of kinds?
Once again, I appreciate the desire of word definitions.
Well, words and definitions.
And I'm not minimizing that. Well, science is everything too. Observation is everything. Words can change, but a human to me has 46 chromosomes, and they play tennis, start wars, do heart surgery. Their children develop extremely slowly. But I don't know if that's answering your question.
So if a person is born and they don't have 46 chromosomes, are they like a different kind, or are they still a person?
Well, some have Crohn's disease. I think it's Crohn's disease, where they have 47 chromosomes. So I would say the overwhelming majority have 46, but mutations do happen, and they're as human as me and you.
So if they had a mutation and something changed and they didn't have the same number of chromosomes, they would still be a person.
Yes. If you want a yes or no.
Sure. And so we can't always look at the genetics too to determine what kind something is, because maybe we don't have DNA too. Like we can't look at the DNA of a trilobite. If we could say, oh, this is the trilobite kind, but what if there's multiple kinds of trilobites? We can't necessarily look at the DNA to figure out how similar they are if there's like clear distinctions. Do you subscribe to the orchard theory, where there's like multiple...
I believe in parallel lines. I know you guys want to, and I say you guys, not sarcastically, you want an orchard or you want a tree. I believe in the parallel lines that a tree will only make a tree. A trilobite will make a trilobite. There's varieties galore. You have lizards. You can breed the lizards. There's still going to be a lizard. So again, like orchard again is another word definition, and I appreciate your desire for that. But I like to talk about observable science.
Do you think, speaking on observable science, do you think we can observe new kinds form, or do you think there's only ever like the one kind? That like it has a one kind and it will always be in that one kind and no new kinds ever form? Or do you think maybe a new kind can form off an existing kind?
That's a good question. I would ponder to say no. We see them going extinct, but we don't see new kinds arriving. That would be my best answer to that. But may I ask you some questions?
Oh yeah, go ahead. I don't mean to dominate.
No. No, it's fine. What is the main reason that you turned from young earth creationist to your current position? Well, I'll just say to your current position. Or do you believe in God? And you can say yes, no, or no comment.
I used to. I don't really anymore, because it always seemed like I was trying to have to fit God into the worldview. And once I just stopped deciding that I was going to believe it and only believe in what the evidence led to, I stopped believing in God. Like I used to believe in werewolves. I used to believe in magic. I used to believe in dragons. And once I stopped, when I made the conscious decision, I can remember it. I was in college. I was in Pensacola Christian College when I made that decision.
Wow.
And it wasn't a key decision. I don't want to say that. It was more like a gradual transition where you made a realization that you had to reevaluate some of your beliefs. And then over time, like you just think about it, it sits in the back of your mind. It's just like steaming back there, and you just kind of come to realize one day, at least for me, I just kind of realized that one day, you know, I don't know if I really believe this anymore. I don't know if I really can. Because I had to kind of reevaluate and come to realization that I I just didn't have an evidence-based view of it anymore.
Love it.
Like there wasn't reason to believe in it.
Okay, and I'm I don't want to ever misquote you. You at first said things didn't fit with God, and then you mentioned evidence. Would you say you don't believe in God because there's no evidence for God, or because it doesn't fit?
I would say because there wasn't evidence. Like I tied all that up into one thing. So I almost had like this basket, and God was in there, and the Bible was in there, and creation was in there, and the kinds were in there. Everything fit in this basket, and nothing ever transitioned. And
Hmm.
yeah, and then oh, spirits was in there. That was a big thing because I was in genetics class, and I had a realization that spirits aren't real.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, I
So,
had grown up with this strong teaching that evolution was false, and that was a huge part of it. It was like you can't believe in evolution and
hmm.
believe in the Bible. And then I saw evidence for evolution, and it was just like, wow, that's undeniable. So I guess this is kind of true. And then that sat in my mind for years. And then I just had to realize I got to stop saying I believe this because I just don't anymore.
Well, here's one of my fun questions.
Like it wasn't a conscious decision. I know a lot of people like to say, "Oh, well, you just don't want to be accountable to anybody, or you want to sin, or something like this." And it's like, no, no. Like I've got that's not it at all. I would want to keep believing, but I just couldn't. It was
Mhm.
painful. It's like realizing you're not part of your family anymore.
Mm, yeah, that's
It,
brutal.
it
Uh,
wasn't a willful choice.
I I know that pursuit of truth can often be painful. Here's a fun question that I ask people, and I am more of a fun guy than a fun guy. On a scale of 1 to 99, because no one can be zero, no one can be 100. Where would you say your belief in God is? 99 is where I would say I am at, if there is a God. Where would you be between 1 and 99?
Probably around a 5. Like
Mhm.
no one can say definitively, I think, in
Exactly.
good conscience that there is no God. Here's what I think there we could believe in multiple things. Like I could believe in a purely materialistic universe. I could also believe in like multiple universes that just kind of pop out of nowhere.
I
I
hope
could
you don't.
also I could also believe in like the simulation theory. Have you ever given consideration to the idea that we live in a simulation?
If we do, could you hand me all your money right now?
Sure, if I can just find a cheat code and spawn more numbers in my bank account, I'll share that with you.
Share your Venmo with me and see if you live in a simulation code or world.
Well,
Yeah,
here's this idea. How many simulations are there? We have simulations today, right? Like this, like if you emulate, like when I was in college, I used to emulate Super Nintendo on my PC, and that's a simulation. And we've got Second Life. That was a simulation. So there's all sorts of simulations. We can run simulations to, simulate computers inside computers. So there's potentially an infinite number of simulations, but there's only one reality. So almost from a mathematical perspective, it's more likely that you're in a simulation right now than you are in the one reality if there's infinite simulations.
but you won't Venmo me $30,000 after this show, will you? Because that's reality.
Well, here's the thing.
I think we're
Even
getting off,
if
but go ahead.
you, sorry, my audio cuts out, so I don't really know whether or not you've stopped talking. So
Okay.
again, I'm not trying to be rude.
All
Go
right. I
ahead,
would like to
continue.
get back to the basics, and I say this kindly. You have a great mind, greater than mine. I'm simple, so bear with
Oh, I
me.
You're a great person to talk to. I
God,
appreciate the conversation.
I'm kind, but I'm not a genius. And I'm actually glad I'm not. But all biases aside, do you really think the human digestive system happened by time, mutation, and chance? Do you really believe that?
I think we would have to go by the evidence. So if you could show that there is a clear progression and that there's a relation, for instance, do you think you're related to a Chinese person?
Absolutely.
I don't want to sound like I'm like
I know.
diverting, but this I've thought about this line of reasoning, and this is yeah. So have you ever seen like do you mind if I ask your ethnicity? You
I
look like an Irishman or something.
Wow. Well, I'm mostly Polish, 50% Polish.
Ah, so am I.
All right.
Polish and German. Yeah.
Not too many Polish people at Pensacola Christian College, but
No, we find our way around everywhere, even if we're not wanted.
yeah. Well, we get kicked out of a lot of places. My mom was 100% Irish, Scottish, Welsh. I did that DNA. They said some Iberian Peninsula, but
That's
European,
cool. So
mostly
we've
Polak.
never seen a Polak give birth to a Chinese person. Why do you believe you're related to a Chinese person?
Mitochondrial DNA. I believe all humans are related, and that's scientific. And they're all a human female ancestor. And I'm sure you're familiar with mitochondrial DNA, right?
Only
And
carried through the mother's lineage.
right. So would you agree with me that you are related to every human on the planet based on mitochondrial DNA?
Well, that's based off some assumptions. You're assuming that the similarities in the mitochondrial DNA indicates relatedness. So would we have to go with that assumption?
Well, we could do a scale of 1 to 99.
There we go.
I'll say 99. I'm related to all humans.
And
What
that's
about you?
based off similarities in the DNA, right?
Mitochondrial DNA.
Mitochondrial. Okay.
We all have the same female ancestor. And as you know, they named her Eve, correct? Which I
They
thought
did.
was
They
nice.
also have a DNA. I don't know if he's mitochondrial. They have a Y chromosome Adam.
I did not know that. I love it. See,
So,
you're coming back.
yeah, but they didn't live at the same time.
That's an assumption. Remember, you mentioned assumptions. That
Well,
is an
there's
assumption.
also an assumption that we have a mitochondrial Eve. You're basing assumptions. Like you're assuming that there weren't multiple creators who just created multiple lines of
No.
humans, maybe, and designed them with similarities because, we're all humans who serve the same function. So maybe the DNA similarities is just a byproduct of having a similar design function. But you're assuming that we're related. We might have been created separately.
Well, if my wife divorces me, I'll marry a Chinese woman and hold up the evidence that that baby shows we are the same. But do you really think, well, let me go more basic. If you don't believe in God, and I respect you, and I truly believe you learn more from people who disagree with you, and so we can be friends for life. And I have
Absolutely.
atheist friends. How do you think life originated? What is your best explanation? Nobody knows for sure. How do you think life originated?
Oh, well, I think it probably originated the same way it continues today with chemical processes.
How did it originate, though? How did
With
non-living matter become living?
so what is living? Living, how do you determine if something is alive or not? Like, do you think viruses are alive?
No, they're parasites.
I'm sorry, I you cut out. I didn't
all
get
the
the
good,
answer.
all the good times it cuts out. I believe viruses are not living; that they're parasites.
Okay, so they're not alive, but they do replicate and they have their own DNA.
Well, they need the host, as you know.
Right.
They can't do
But
without the host.
but like tapeworms also need a host. Botflies need a host, but they're alive.
You're right.
So
But
needing a host doesn't, and like you could almost say that we need a host planet. We can't survive just in the vacuum of space. The fact
amen.
that we need a planet to live on doesn't mean that we're not alive.
It's a
But a
system.
virus replicates. A virus
As-
has its own DNA. We can trace lineages. We can say one virus is related to another virus.
right.
So wouldn't you say viruses are alive?
No,
No?
I'm not a
Why not?
virus expert. My little bit of research on viruses, and I've talked to evolutionists and atheists and creationists about it, is that viruses are a parasite. They're not living.
But parasites do live. Like a tapeworm is alive.
Well, Well, the virus is a parasite that needs a host that it sustains its life from. But I don't know if you're intentionally doing it, but how do you think life originated?
I think life originated through chemical processes.
And is that based on
And I think
science?
that's how we can determine whether something is alive because it maintains homeostasis. Yes.
Okay. What science do you base on non-living chemicals becoming living?
Because we can see replicating patterns in it. We can see, so something becomes living because it desires to maintain a stasis. And so when we see those chemical processes, we can determine that something is happening, that something is maintaining homeostasis. So there's a transition. Something goes from being alive to being dead. You would agree, right there, right?
Oh, no, nothing died, of course. Yes. But I think what is your evidence of, I know you said replicating, non-living
Yeah.
material becoming living. Is there evidence for that?
Yes, because we can see organic molecules on asteroids. We can see organic molecules in outer space where nothing necessarily is alive. So we see the basis, the founding building blocks.
Okay, we see the building blocks. I agree with you. There's a lot
Yes.
of building blocks, but you got to jump that Grand Canyon of non-life to life.
Yeah.
Where is it? What is your evidence? Okay, there's organic molecules on an asteroid or meteor. How does it become living?
I
Your
think
best explanation.
I think it's possible that we could live in a simulation and maybe that first, that designer put that first replicating organic molecule in the simulation. I think that's a possibility. I don't think there's a huge chance of that. I would put maybe like, if we were to put a confidence score, I'd put maybe like 12% confidence on that. But I think that's a possibility. I think it's also possible since we see organic compounds and RNA molecules on asteroids and meteorites and potentially in other interstellar objects that our planet could have been seeded from outer space.
Okay, then these seeds became living.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe that is maybe a 1 out of 99. I mean, to me, that's everything that we know against science. You know the cell theory. Living cells can only come from a living cell. The law of
Well, no,
biogenesis.
we only see living cells. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay. Living cells come from living cells. That's in the biology book. Biology used to teach, but it got censored, but it's still a law. The law of biogenesis, life only comes from life. That's what we observe trillions of times a day. And yet people who are atheists, and I'm not labeling you with any word, say, well, billions, you got to wave your hands, billions of years ago, life originated from non-life. And I asked you for the evidence, and you said seeds from asteroids. That's quite a leap. Seeds from asteroids became a living organism.
Well, the evidence is that we see a time when life didn't exist, and then we see that life did exist. So there's, at some point, our planet went from not having life to having very simple life, and then that simple life became more complex. So that's the evidence. But you don't have fossils of molecules. So I would ask you, where would you disprove that idea?
Well, there's no such thing as simple life. It's all incredibly complex. It's all a system that works together.
But you just said viruses are not sophisticated enough to be considered alive because they need a host.
I didn't say they weren't sophisticated enough to be alive. I said they're a parasite that needs a host. They're extremely complicated.
They have DNA and they replicate, so they're alive. I don't know. I don't know why you don't think they're alive.
Okay, I think you're diverting from my question about how you think life originated, and you say you base it on RNA on meteors.
So there's something interesting.
I think it's an emotional belief. Go ahead. Not a scientific, because you want that to be the explanation.
So there's something I want to touch on that because you may take this as a compliment. I've watched a lot of your videos over the last 2 weeks, and you said something in an interview, and I had to write it down because it was really remarkable. And you said, You were talking in an interview about Mount Rushmore, and you said no one could look at Mount Rushmore and not conclude that it had a designer. And then you said someone might say, well, what about that designer's father? How do we know who
Exactly.
the designer's father was? And you said, well, I think the only reason someone would ask for evidence that the designer of Mount Rushmore had a father is if they were trying to obfuscate and trying to divert from the fact that it was designed. So I think that's also true of people who demand evidence of abiogenesis. I think the only reason you're trying to ask about the origins of the first living thing is trying to divert from the fact that we see evidence of evolution.
Okay,
I think it's a good argument, and I would just turn it around and use it on the creationist side.
excellent. Can we agree that you're not very certain on how life originated by natural means? Are you willing to say that?
I would say that we don't know definitively how it happened, but we have experiments that demonstrate how it could have happened because we have experiments that show RNA molecules and polypeptides self-synthesizing on wet dry clay cycling. Like I'm not an expert
Mhm.
on biosynthesis, but there's been a lot of experiments that showed that these polypeptides and these RNA molecules do self-assemble. So
But of course, are far from life, you would say, or at least not life. I would say far from life. Would you agree?
maybe we should come up with almost like a pseudo life term that, and we could put like viruses in there and self-replicating RNA molecules and it maybe quasi life. Let's call it quasi life. How about that?
I don't want to sign any contract that I'm not sure what I'm signing.
You're a wise man. I like you.
Well, but I I'll just be completely honest. If I was an atheist, I would try to desperately come up with ideas on how life originated to justify my worldview. But to me that's a slam dunk that life had to have had a supernatural origin due to what we observe. But I respect that you're looking for other, and not only does life have to, I believe, created, well, suppose life did happen by chance. What would that first life have to do in order for me and you to be here today having this debate? And I'm not trying to set you up. I'll answer it if you want. I'm honestly not trying to do that.
Could you repeat the question because it cut
Okay.
out again and I didn't get the full question?
Okay, let's suppose matter and energy giggle, wiggle, and jiggle and become living.
Sure.
That's awesome. It's never going to happen, but suppose it did.
In
What
La
does
La
that
Land.
suppose
Sure.
that, well, on Earth, that first life has to be able to do what in order for me and you to be having this pleasant conversation?
It has to replicate.
It has to be able to replicate. And
Hmm.
that's distinct from just being alive. It has to metabolize.
Well, I don't know. Alive, yeah.
To stay alive, it's going to die if it doesn't metabolize.
Yeah. No, I think that's a correct assertion. Like let's say being alive is the act of maintaining homeostasis. Like if it can keep some kind of aspect of itself constant, then it's alive. But in order to evolve, it has to replicate. I think that's a good
Right.
assertion.
Right. And most, not all, there's single cell division, transportation, react to stimuli. You got to survive besides just internally, externally.
Hmm.
And my goal is just to share what I believe is truth. It's not to change your mind. That's up to you. But I hope I'll just, that from ground zero, you realize a system cannot evolve. A living
Hmm.
system can't evolve. Like you can't get a heart before a lung. You can't get a kidney before a stomach in a human. You can't get an eye before an
Hmm.
optic nerve. You can't get there step by step. You can't get a proton before you get an electron. All of these systems, I'll just throw this out here. Start from ground zero. You don't have to. That there is a designer. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2 is a brand new chapter of who the designer is. And I think a lot of people give up on chapter 1 because of an experience in chapter 2, like hypocritical Christians, or it was forced on them, or intolerant.
How many? Do you mind if I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So, what if now you played with me and said, let's assume that evolution is true and the first thing happened. I want to return the favor. Let's play with your belief and let's say there is a designer who designed life. How many designers are there?
There is one absolute designer.
How do you know that?
I don't, but here comes my inference.
Let's go back to the scale of 1 to 100. What is your confidence that there's only one designer?
99.
99.
0.9.
Why is that?
Okay.
Why is that?
I shall continue gladly, and I enjoy talking to you. And I think together we'll learn more about things. I'm writing notes down here, like the atom why. When I talk to people, I ask them, well, do you mind if I ask you, just in general, where do you work? You can make up the name. I'm not trying to stalk you.
I work at home, honestly.
Oh, you work for a company, though?
I work for a company, yes.
Eventually, is there one big boss man?
That's something that I complain about to a lot of people because it's almost like I have 3 bosses.
Mm-hmm. I could say a few jokes there, but I won't. But in your company, there is eventually one big boss man, right?
Not really. What if you have a board of directors and no one owns the company?
There's no CEO?
Does the CEO own the company? Because sometimes CEOs get fired, so they're not necessarily the boss.
Exactly. Well, you know where I'm getting at, right? There's one person whose head is on the chopping block. I know there's a board of directors.
I wouldn't agree with you, but go ahead.
There's no boss. Well, I like to tell people, if you're in the Army, if you're in school, if you have a job, eventually there's all kinds of people between you and them, but there is one big boss man. And I do believe there could be all kinds of theories about different religions and origins, but I believe you can't have 12 separate creators. I believe that there is one big boss man. So in everything that I see that operates as a system, there's eventually one big boss. And I do believe there is one big boss, and that's the God of the Bible. But, okay, you froze for a second.
Sorry. I don't know if it's internet on my end or your end.
Maybe it was just you thinking deep thought. I thought you froze.
Trying something a little bit too hard.
Yeah. Was your question, hey, Bill, do you think there's 12 designers out there, 2 designers, or only one?
Well, I wanted to interject. What I was going to interrupt you and say is I think our tendency to point to like one supreme head, one God, is just kind of us imprinting our primitive human structure because, we tend to have like one president, one king, one chieftain. We tend to have just the one pack leader, the one silverback gorilla, the one head wolf. We look to one individual. And so I think that could cloud perhaps our perception of what we expect to exist. But if we're looking at like the orchard, why isn't there one God per orchard? Like lots of early religions, they had a pantheon of gods. They recognized that there might be multiple gods. It wasn't until much later that monotheism took over. Like if you look back in the Bible, and I'm going to go back to the Bible a lot because I love the Bible. I studied the Bible for years. And the very first chapter of the very first verse in the first chapter in Genesis, it has a plural word for God. Elohim is a plural word. God said, let us form the dry land. Let us make man in our image. It's all plural. It's multiple Godheads. And if you were to look at an evidence-based view of creation design, you see multiple designs. There's single-celled life. There's fungi. There's archaea. There's true bacteria. There's algae. There's true plants. There's, the fish, the tetrapods. There's the centipedes. There's invertebrates. There's so many different branching varieties of design that don't mix and match. Like you don't have a cephalopod arm with like a squirrel tail. You see distinct designs. So it's almost like there's one designer per lineage, per clade, per branch of this orchard tree. So I don't see necessarily from the evidence that there's one designer. It looks like there could be multiple designers. Wouldn't you agree? I don't think that's unreasonable.
To get back to the basics, do you agree that the squirrel is the result of design? Now, chapter 1, it could be anything.
I think it's designed by nature.
What is nature? Help me with
Nature,
that.
nature is the environment and everything that goes into it. So if you take, because we look at nature as kind of a conglomerate. So nature is like, if I were to look at my nature, it could be my work, my family, my neighborhood, my roommates. That's the nature that I know. If I go down to the street, the cashier is part of that nature. Nature is just how you interact with the rest of the world. It's everything that influences you and is direct contact with you. So, like, is the atmosphere on Pluto or the atmosphere on Neptune part of nature? It's not part of my nature, but it's part of nature in general, right? So
Well,
it doesn't really affect me that much unless you believe in astrology. Ooh, Mercury's in retrograde. I just
okay.
pissed off somebody out there.
You said nature is
But
the environment
I
and everything in
that's
it.
part of nature.
How
Like, nature is just what exists.
is nature a designer? Does it have intellect and thought?
I think nature does potentially have an IQ. How would you measure the IQ of nature? I think nature is a conglomeration of all knowledge. All knowledge is contained in nature. Like, you believe you can go look at nature and gain truths about God, right? You can understand that God exists by looking at nature. So there's some knowledge contained in nature. So I think you could say that nature has an IQ of infinity.
Is a squirrel a part of nature?
I'm
Hello?
sorry, you're
Is a
you're coming in and
squirrel
out.
is a squirrel a part of nature?
Yes.
So nature made nature.
I think nature does make nature. Yeah.
Why would you say nature can design a squirrel, but not Almighty God of the Bible that you say you love reading? What's what's
Well,
keeping you from that?
what's God's IQ?
Infinity plus one.
How do you measure God's IQ?
I did a test and I gave it to God, and He got infinity on it.
That's clever. I didn't think of that.
Exactly. You come to me for the answers, my friend.
You're
And
a man with many answers.
yes, I can answer any question, not correctly, but I can give you an answer.
Hey, there we go. That's all we need.
But
But
you see
yeah,
my point? Okay, something designed the squirrel, right? You said nature designed the squirrel. I say
mhm.
Almighty God with an IQ of infinity designed the squirrel. Does that make sense? And,
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? It went in and
okay,
out again.
okay. I say God designed the squirrel. You say nature designed the squirrel. I say God's got an IQ of infinity, and He's the creator of life and the creator of nature. Nature is living, a lot of it. There's no scientific explanation for that. But I don't want to throw too many eggs in the pan. I just made that term
I
up.
think nature has an IQ of infinity.
And so it has thought and planning. So you
hmm
agree there's a
Yeah,
designer.
the squirrel thinks about things. The
Okay,
squirrel plans for winter.
absolutely. And so you do believe there is a designer of squirrels.
I think nature designed the
Right.
squirrel.
But that is a designer, right?
Yeah.
So then we're just discussing maybe that's chapter one. There's something that designed. Chapter two, is it the God of the Bible that's a designer?
Well, which God? Because what
Exactly.
this is something I wanted to ask
That's
you.
chapter two.
How did you determine that Jehovah is the only God? Or
Okay.
I guess we're going to do Jehovah. And do you believe in Yahweh, or do you merge Yahweh and Jehovah into the same God?
Well,
How,
Jehovah is not in the Bible, but YHWH was the abbreviation, but that's a Bible discussion.
it's
Jehovah
in
is a
Hebrew though. So the Hebrews wrote the Bible, and the Hebrews had Jehovah and Yahweh.
well, they would have YHWH in their scripts, but I am definitely not a Bible. I've read it, but I can't debate that. But I have read that Jehovah is a man-made word with vowels added to YHWH. And I'll tell you how old I am, not to digress. When I went to church,
You're like 49, right?
38,
Oh, there. I was close.
64. When we went to church, we didn't get gas on the way home. You know why?
Save money.
There
Maybe
was no gas
it was
stations
cheaper
open.
somewhere else. Oh, okay.
All the gas stations were closed. All the stores were closed.
On
Every
Sunday, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. And you didn't even flippantly say the word God. It was like, wait, you know what I mean? Way back in the days, you only used that word if you were praying. So, anyways, so that the Jewish people would not even assign a name to Jesus or to God, as far as I know, YHWH. But getting back to it, so you do agree that there is a designer. Chapter 2 is we're just discussing who the designer is. Would that be
Or
fair?
how many designers? How many designers? Because we don't know that there's just one.
So you agree there is a designer or designers of the squirrel?
Yes.
Awesome. I would like you to investigate why you reject it to be the God of the Bible and you think it's some nature which is part of the design.
Well, how did you determine that there's only one designer and it's the God of the King James Version Bible?
How did I determine that? I think I don't know if it's on purpose, but I think you're begging the question that it is. How about this?
Well,
And
you're
I'm not
begging the
running
question.
from
There's designers, so I'm just. Can I play? I can play by your rules, right?
Absolutely. Maybe we'll push who the designer is to chapter 3. I say the designer is supernatural and eternal, not composed of matter and energy.
This sounds like begging the question to me.
Well, you want to skip from is there a designer to the King James use of the word Jehovah. And to me, that's begging as well. And we both agree there's a designer. And I do believe the designer is supernatural and the creator of matter and energy.
But you have settled on a particular designer. I'm just asking you how you got to that one singular particular designer. How did you settle on that as your designer?
And this isn't begging the question. There is a designer. I'm at 99.9%.
So if you were to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if we were going to go with that like 0.0001 chance, who would that other designer be in your worldview? Who do you think that would be?
I don't think you were listening.
Sorry, it might have cut out.
99.999% there is a designer.